Warning, some viewers may be too lame to enjoy the following information.
Kings Island dares you to come face to face with the Beast. The Beast. 7,400 feet of unrestrained terror. In a 70-mile-per-hour attack on your senses, the Beast throws you screaming through 3 tunnels, takes you higher than any other coaster. Come face to face with the Beast. The Beast. The biggest, baddest, longest, fastest coaster in the world.
That was a TV commercial from 1979, advertising the Beast, which at the time was the newest roller coaster at Kings Island, an amusement park located in Cincinnati, Ohio. The ride was the world's tallest, fastest, and most importantly, longest wooden roller coaster. The ride features a 141-foot drop and takes riders along 7,359 feet of track through 35 acres of woods. 40 years later, the Beast is no longer the world's tallest or fastest wooden roller coaster, but it still remains the world's longest wooden roller coaster. Kings Island ran a genius marketing strategy to build hype for the ride, and the buzz for it was absolutely massive when it opened. At the time, the Beast was truly the granddaddy of coasters, and if you were a coaster fan, you had to ride it. Over the years, the ride has remained extremely popular with the general public, so much that if you want to skip the line at the ride, you'll have to purchase a Fastlane Plus, rather than the cheaper standard Fastlane. Newer and very popular rides like Diamondback or Banshee are both offered on the standard Fastlane Pass, but if you'd like to skip the wait for the 40-year-old Beast, that's an additional upcharge. The Beast used to also be extremely popular with roller coaster enthusiasts when it first opened. Coaster enthusiasts would travel far distances specifically for it. Nowadays, the ride does not maintain the same relationship with a large amount of roller coaster enthusiasts. In fact, most of the enthusiasts I talk to don't seem to really care much for it at all, and even talk down on it. In this video, I will be discussing why this legendary roller coaster gets so much hate, and why I think it really shouldn't be getting this at all. When compared to newer wooden roller coasters, or just modern day roller coasters in general, the ride is quite dull. Let's compare the Beast to a ride called the Voyage, another monstrous wooden roller coaster located at Holiday World in Santa Claus, Indiana. The Voyage features 6,442 feet of track and is the only wooden roller coaster that comes close to the length of the Beast. However, the Voyage opened in 2006 and it features a much more modern design. Now the Beasts and the Voyage have a few similarities. Both are extremely long and both are terrain coasters, meaning that they are not built on flat surfaces and use hilly terrain to their advantage. But beyond that, the two coasters couldn't be more different. The Voyage is much more modern and state-of-the-art, while the Beast is far more antiquated and classic. The Voyage was designed and built more traditionally. The ride's design was done by the Gravity Group, a well-established roller coaster firm built on the backbone of other legacy roller coaster design firms, such as Custom Coasters International and DIN Corporation. More on that later. The ride was designed using various computer-aided draft and design programs, which allowed all of its aspects to be calculated with near 100% precision. This is why the Voyage features perfectly designed airtime hills, extraordinary pacing, lateral forces, and overall, it just feels like a well-designed product. The ride was designed by professionals with years and years of experience, as well as with decades of roller coaster design beforehand that helped inspire and shape the state-of-the-art design the Voyage features. It is without a doubt a much more thrilling and intense coaster than the Beast. To roller coaster enthusiasts, rides like the Voyage have set the new standard for how a good wooden roller coaster should be. Meanwhile, the Beast was not designed and built traditionally. In fact, the ride was not designed by a roller coaster firm at all. Instead, Kings Island just did it themselves. And they designed this ride way back before computers were used for this kind of stuff. So it was simply done by hand. Well, not really simply, because this poses many more limitations. In fact, John C. Allen, a famous and legendary roller coaster designer, wrote down a few formulas on the back of a menu that the park used to design the coaster. Design and construction of the Beast was led by Charles Dinn, who at the time was the head of maintenance at Kings Island. The design process began in 1976 and took 2 years to complete, as the design team had to calculate tens of thousands of formulas by hand without the aid of a computer or even a scientific calculator. Not only did they have to do all the calculations by hand, but surveying the land the ride would sit on was also done by hand. Going back to John C. Allen for a second, he did not technically design the coaster, but he did offer several tips and tricks for the team at Kings Island. The iconic second lift hill found on the Beast was actually his idea. The section of track leading into the second lift hill is at the lowest level of terrain on the ride. Thus, the coaster needs to travel uphill to make it to the station. The design team hit a roadblock at this point, as they had difficulty designing the coaster so that it could travel back uphill on gravity alone, or more so that gravity was the problem. So John Allen proposed the idea of a second lift hill, which the park went with. So to me, since the Beast was constructed by Kings Island, who had no prior experience with designing a roller coaster, it's almost as if I built a roller coaster by myself, or if you built one. The coaster is essentially homemade. It is homemade. It's like a backyard coaster you may have seen on the internet, such as Blue Flash, a homemade steel roller coaster, or this homemade wooden roller coaster in Oklahoma, but on steroids. To me, this is why the coaster doesn't feel completely perfect, or why some sections of the ride are suddenly long and straight, why some sections suddenly become more intense out of nowhere, why the ride seems to meander through the woods for awkwardly long amounts of time, or why the coaster features trim brakes that slow down the train at different points on the ride. This ride is like a massive science project. It's quite literally a massive, homemade backyard coaster, and it's a backyard coaster you can ride at a major amusement park, rather than having to build your own. To me, this means that the ride carries a different kind of energy and spirit. The idea here isn't for the ride to deliver some of the craziest design elements you've ever seen on a roller coaster, but for you to quite literally ride the world's largest backyard roller coaster. And being 100% honest, they did a damn good job at building this coaster. The original design team crafted a coaster that has stood the test of time. The ride is already 40 years old, and I see zero signs that the ride is leaving the park anytime soon. I can see this coaster outliving some of the newer steel coasters at the park. In fact, it has already outlived several of the steel roller coasters previously found at the park, such as Firehawk, which originally opened in 2002 at Geauga Lake and later closed in 2018, or Vortex, which opened at Kings Island in 1987 and unfortunately just closed this year, RIP. While steel roller coasters may require less maintenance at first, steel will fatigue and weaken after years of continuous loading. Now the same thing happens with wood coasters, but wood is far easier to replace than prefabricated pieces of steel. Replacing sections of steel track or steel supports is very, very expensive, and can be hard to do if the original company that designed the ride is no longer in business. However, the same cannot be said about wooden roller coasters. What's so genius about the Beast is that its design allows it to be sustainable. The ride doesn't feature over-the-top intensity, which means the trains do not beat the track to a pulp. And most of the ride is very low to the ground, meaning there's less structure that needs to be replaced, and doing track work on the ride is easier, since it's very flat and at ground level. A well-designed wooden coaster can last for decades upon decades, and the Beast is absolutely in that category. The park has made many changes to their science project over the years to increase its lifespan. The ride originally opened with 4 bench cars, meaning each car of the train was 1 row longer than they currently are. This made rounding turns a bit harder, as the trains did not have as tight of a turning radius, meaning the cars put more stress on the track every time they rounded a corner. The park converted the original 5-car, 4-bench PTC trains to 6-car, 3-bench PTC trains, which are more capable of navigating the ride's turns. This change was made for the 1981 season. Now this is why the ride's air gates do not perfectly line up with each row, because the air gates were designed for the original 4-bench trains. The park has also added additional banking to many of the ride's turns, which helps to relieve the stress the trains put on the track and structure. With the ride being homemade, not all of the forces the ride creates were accounted for perfectly, so that additional banking helps to increase its longevity. One area of the ride that has significantly more banking than when it originally opened is the ride's ending helix. This helix immediately follows a 141-foot drop off the second lift hill, and is actually the fastest part of the ride. At least I think so. The ride originally featured almost no banking around this helix, and I'm sure it offered a massive amount of lateral forces. However, that design probably would not have stood the test of time, so the park increased the banking of the helix. Now one may argue that this ruined the helix since it took away many of the lateral forces, but to me, this is easily the best section of the ride. That helix is intense and fast. The long shallow drop followed by a sudden left-hand turn at the start of the helix is out of this world. Especially since the ride's tunnel was designed at a point in time where clearance envelopes didn't really matter. So when you see that sign that says keep your hands and arms inside the train at all times, they mean it. So you can actually touch the tunnel if you try to, but please don't. Overall, I'd say the helix is fast, intense, and claustrophobic. Ride the coaster on the left side of the train and you'll know what I mean by claustrophobic. It's without a doubt my favorite helix on any coaster. Now onto the most controversial quote-unquote upgrade. The park has also changed the trim brakes the coaster uses for better longevity. The ride has always had trim brakes, but the original trim brakes were skid brakes, which lift the train off the track and slow the train down using metal plates. The park has since upgraded these brakes to magnetic brakes, which are easier to maintain as they generate no wear and tear since this braking method is completely contactless. The skid brakes were more gradual and did not suddenly slow down the train, but did so more gently, whereas the magnetic brakes slow down the train in a quick burst rather than gradually. Now both iterations of the trim brakes were designed to slow the trains to the same amount, but the magnetic brakes do make the ride feel slower since they are more noticeable, but the ride still runs at the exact same speed. This is probably the biggest complaint amongst roller coaster enthusiasts, well besides the lack of airtime. But going back to my original point, to me, I can look past these brakes because the ride is homemade, it's in-house. Of course not everything will be perfect. There was no computer to design this ride with, or even a calculator. But these very trim brakes are most likely one of the reasons we are still able to enjoy this coaster at all. They help to maintain the train's speed and lessen the wear and tear on the track. And regarding that slow first lift hill that many like to joke about, that lift hill wasn't always slow. The first brake shed on the ride was originally the end of a block zone that could fully stop a train if necessary. If you're unfamiliar with block zones, you can think of them as traffic lights that stop a train from entering the next segment if another train is directly ahead in the next block zone. Only one train can occupy a block zone at a time, and this is to help avoid collisions. After the original skid brakes were replaced with magnetic brakes, the ability to fully stop a train here was also removed, as skid brakes are capable of completely stopping a train, while magnetic brakes technically can't do this on their own. Now the park could have still left a section of block if they had also added a few friction brakes here as well, but the park chose not to. I hear this is because trains would commonly have to stop in this brake shed due to the second lift hill not being clear yet, which the park ultimately wanted to avoid. So back in the day, a train could drop off the first lift hill before the train ahead of it had cleared the second lift hill, because there was a block zone in between. But nowadays, trains can no longer do this because the second lift hill is now the only block following the first lift hill. So that second lift must be clear for a train to drop off the first lift. This is why the train slowly creeps up the first lift hill, because the computer is giving the train ahead time to clear the second lift hill. And once that lift hill is clear, the train on the first lift hill accelerates to a normal speed. And if the crew is running really slow and the trains are all stacking, you'll just go up the lift hill full speed because that second lift hill is already clear. This move has actually reduced the capacity of the ride as a result, meaning less riders can ride each hour. But having less trains traverse the track also helps extend the ride's longevity. Now going back to the original point of this whole video, I really don't think this ride should be getting the hate it does. In fact, it should be praised. This coaster is truly in a class of its own and helped lead to many other roller coasters we enjoy today. Charles Dinh, who led the project to create the Beast, eventually left Kings Island in 1983 to start his own roller coaster company, Dinh Corporation. Dinh Corporation started off by relocating older wooden roller coasters. Two of the three coasters they relocated are Phoenix at Knoebels and Wild One at Six Flags America. Both of these coasters are loved today, and that's largely thanks to Dinh Corporation, who moved the rides. Dinh later went on to build their own original rides as well, some of which were highly regarded, such as Texas Giant at Six Flags Over Texas, or Timberwolf at Worlds of Fun. Others, not so much. Many companies have also formed out of Dinh Corporation, such as Custom Coasters International and Great Coasters International. Custom Coasters, or CCI for short, went on to build many popular rides, like Raven and Legend at Holiday World or Boulder Dash at Lake Compounds. Great Coasters International, or GCI for short, went on to build popular rides like Thunderhead at Dollywood, Gold Striker at California's Great America, and Prowler at Worlds of Fun. GCI is still building new rides. Custom Coasters International went out of business in the early 2000s, and guess what company formed out of that? Gravity Group Inc. And guess what coaster they built? The Voyage at Holiday World, which I referenced at the start of this video. Rocky Mountain Construction is another very popular roller coaster manufacturer, and the company got their big start by renovating a coaster built by Dinh Corporation, Texas Giant at Six Flags Over Texas. And since then, the company has renovated Mean Streak at Cedar Point, another coaster built by Dinh. That ride is now known as Steel Vengeance and is one of the best coasters in the world. So many of the roller coaster manufacturers and roller coasters we love and enjoy today all tie back to the Beast at Kings Island. The Beast is easily one of the most important coasters ever built. Its success in the late 1970s and early 1980s gave Charles Dinh the opportunity to go on and do more for the roller coaster scene, which eventually allowed more and more to contribute further. The fact that the Beast even exists is a large part of why we can enjoy a ride like Seal Vengeance now. A lot of roller coaster enthusiasts nowadays are spoiled by the state-of-the-art designs featured in modern-day roller coasters, which feature mind-boggling ride elements with fun and exciting forces. And I can't blame them for being so. I used to be as well. But I think another part of being a roller coaster enthusiast should also be appreciating the history of roller coasters, as the history is the only reason we enjoy the coasters we do today. So the Beast is an iconic piece of roller coaster history, and besides that, the ride is insanely fun in my eyes. I love rummaging through the woods uncontrollably on the Beast. And don't get me started on how good a night ride on the coaster is. Everyone needs to try riding this thing at night at some point in their lives. For all these reasons, I can fairly say the Beast is actually my favorite coaster at Kings Island. The ride does nothing but put a smile on my face. It's not the smoothest or most thrilling coaster, but that's exactly what I love about it. It's a big backyard coaster. I'm not saying that everyone needs to love the ride for what it is, but I think more people should appreciate it. Maybe after watching this video, many of you will go ride the Beast with a different perspective and see just how cool it really is. So that'll end my discussion on the Beast. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Be sure to leave a comment down below on what you think of the ride, and thank you for watching, everyone.